Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight,
you have blood on your hands. If you had just done your jobs properly, there's a very good chance my beautiful boy would be alive today.
how was this proven lunatic allowed to kill 3 innocent people and not get done for murder? And one of these MPs is behind a plot to oust Rishi Sunak. I reveal who. I also have exclusive and astonishing polling data that's just landed. What's Labour's lead? Is it right to ban prayer rooms in schools? And much, much more than this. Are fat kids the victim of child abuse, and should parents be prosecuted? And
I think our main focus should be on those that have been born here, educated here.
British people should be given social housing before immigrants. What's controversial about that? On my panel tonight is GB News star Emily Carver, Lord Bailey and Amy Nicole Turner. And find out which football team looks like their fans have joined the Ku Klux Klan. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. A GB News exclusive, followed by another GB News exclusive after this.
Patrick, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, as you've been hearing, the mother of murdered teenager Barnaby Webber says Nottinghamshire police have blood on their hands after her son's killer was sent to a high-security psychiatric hospital rather than given a prison sentence. 32-year-old Valdo Calacane was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia when he killed university students Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar and school caretaker Ian Coates in June last year. He pleaded not guilty to murder due to his mental condition, but did admit manslaughter. Speaking outside the court, the victim's family said the triple killer had made a mockery of the system and got away with murder.
The fails from the police, the CPS, the health service have resulted in the murder of my father and these 2 innocent students. The NHS Mental Health Trusts have to be held accountable for their failures along with the police. All we can do is hope that in due course some sort of justice will be served. This man has made a mockery of the system and he has got away with murder.
James Coates, son of Ian Coates, the caretaker who died in that killing spree in Nottingham. Well, the government today has been defending its record on tackling knife crime in a third crackdown in 8 years. The Home Secretary says the new restrictions are aimed at closing what he called a loophole, which allows some types of so-called zombie knives to be kept and sold. And while Labour says the new legislation doesn't go far enough and there needs to be tougher penalties, James Cleverly says the government is taking the right action.
I became Home Secretary, I made the immediate decision to go further, to put forward this secondary legislation to support what we've already done, to make the possession of zombie knives illegal and to close the loophole. So I'm very pleased we're taking action now. We have seen a reduction in crime. We have a plan to drive it down further. That plan is working. We're determined to take these knives off the streets.
James Cleverly. Well, in other news today, criminal gangs who try to smuggle items into prisons using drones will face new penalties from today. New 400-metre no-fly zones are now in force around British prisons. It means anyone caught trying to fly items like phones, drugs or weapons into prisons using drones will pay a £2,500 fine. There'll also be a 10-year maximum prison sentence for anyone breaching the restrictions. A man has been sentenced to 13 years in prison for encouraging and paying for the sexual abuse of young children around the world. Over a period of 9 years, Matthew Bauer from Kent sought out people online, both adults and children, who he then could coerce into sending him explicit content. The 52-year-old first denied the crime, saying he'd been hacked, before eventually he pleaded guilty to 15 offences and making more than 1,700 indecent images of children. Shoplifting offences in England and Wales are at the highest level in 20 years. The Office for National Statistics saying more than 400,000 offences were recorded in the year to September. That's up by nearly a third. Downing Street says ministers are looking into how to tackle the rising problem. More work's needed to tackle obesity among children amid warnings that increases due to the pandemic could cost more than £8 million. A new study found obesity in English children rose significantly among those at ages 4 and 5 and then again at ages 10 and 11. Researchers warn that overweight kids will cost the NHS more as they get older because fatter children tend to become obese adults. They also found that children living in deprived areas of England are twice as likely to be overweight than those from better-off backgrounds. That's the news on GB News, on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is Britain's News Channel.
We start with the GB News exclusive, followed by another GB News exclusive. The current plan to oust Rishi Sunak is this. Penny Mordaunt, the leader of the House of Commons, would be installed as Prime Minister with a commitment to an election after just 100 days. Apparently, Labour fear Penny Mordaunt more than they fear Mr Sunak. This is all from our political editor, Christopher Hope, and it's been called The Contract with Britain. Now, for the second GB News exclusive, I'm about to reveal astonishing brand-new polling data that has just landed. So here we go. Starting with Westminster voting intention, Labour are on 45% with a 25-point lead over the Tories. Interestingly, Reform are the third most popular party now on 12%. Then follows the Lib Dems on 10% and the Greens on 9%. Let's drill down into those numbers for Reform, shall we? 14% said they are likely to vote for Richard Tice's party, which rises to 29% for 2019 Conservative voters. 60%, however, stated they are unlikely. We also asked, would you replace Rishi Sunak as PM? Who would you replace him with? And Nigel Farage was the most popular choice among a host of big-name Tories. The GB News man came in at, well, it's not exactly a resounding victory, is it? 8%. Boris Johnson was second with 7%, followed closely behind by Penny Mordaunt. So, hey, perhaps then, Miss Mordaunt is the most realistic candidate to replace the PM after all. But here's a stat that will cause tremors in Conservative HQ. Alongside the names that I just mentioned were politicians like Kemi Badenoch, Suella Braverman and the Home Secretary James Cleverly. But crucially, 51% of people responded to say none of the above. Grief. So, the public see a complete dearth of talent in the Conservative Party, apparently. I've got a couple more for you now. When asked, would you willingly fight for your country in another world war, just 17% of people said yes. 14% said they would if they were forced to. I think technically we all would if we were forced to, but there we go. With 30% said that they'd do anything to avoid it. Now, this is important as well. After my eye-opening interview with Britain's strictest head teacher, Catherine Birbalsingh, 38% of people said they supported her decision to ban all prayer at the Michaela school, while 28% oppose it. So, Labour lead by 25 points. Reform up to 14% in some measures. Nigel, the most popular person to replace Sunak, and it's right, apparently, to ban prayer rooms. And just 17% of people would willingly fight for Britain. Here to shed more light on this now is the man behind the numbers. It's pollster extraordinaire. It's Matt Goodwin. Matt, thank you very much. What's the most important bit of this data for you, do you think, then?
Well, there's lots of things going on, Patrick. We've got a poll that suggests Labour is still on course for an enormous majority at the next election, but we can also see Rishi Sunak is being really squeezed by this reform vote. Just to give you a perspective of what's happening beneath the surface, 1 in 4 Brexit voters, 1 in 4 2019 Conservatives saying they're going to reform. This is a nail in the coffin for the Conservative Party's prospects. The other thing I think is quite interesting about this poll is, you know, look at that issue of conscription. It's been dominating social media this week. Lots of people saying, you know, lots of Brits out there not sure if they'd fight for their country. 17% saying they would willingly fight for Britain if there was another world war. That's not even 1 in 5. I think that's going to cause, I think, a lot of reflection out there in the country. What's going on? Why don't people want to fight for their country anymore? Those are the things that stand out to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's just drill down on that desire, lack of, to fight for Britain. What do you think is behind that? Some people saying we've willingly, blindly created a divided society with no sense of national unity or pride in a way.
Well, I think if I was in China or Russia, I'd be pretty happy with how things are going in the West, because we've imported these, you know, US-style narratives that are essentially saying, you know, the West is racist, we're ashamed of our identity, we're not committed to our identity. I think we've got a political class that's a bit out of touch with the rest of the country, not really sure how to tell them, you know, the reasons why we should be proud to be British, we should be defending this identity. So 17%, I think, stands out for me. Interestingly, when you look again beneath the surface, 18 to 24-year-olds, this is what worries me. That number falls even further. Only about 14% say they'd willingly fight for their country if there was another world war. And, of course, you know, this is something that I think we're seeing in questions about the monarchy, in questions about our history, questions about, you know, do you support the Israelis? Do you support the Palestinians? We can see among the 18 to 24s a very different mindset from that which dominates the Gen Xers and the baby boomers. There's something in the water now, I think, when it comes to these young Brits. They just simply see the world in a very different way from the rest of us.
It's incredibly revealing and concerning, actually. Let's have a little look now at one of the other big standout ones for me from that, which is, if Rishi Sunak was to be replaced, who would you want to replace him with? So Nigel Farage topped the list, and initially I saw that, and I thought, I'll be interested to see, oh, it's 8%, is it? Right, OK, well, it's not exactly a ringing endorsement. 51% of people said, out of quite an extensive list of names he presented them there with, they didn't fancy any of them. What does all of this really mean?
Yeah, so I think what you've got here is just basically a brand in British politics, a Conservative brand that is completely toxic. There are lots of voters now that, at the moment I mention Conservative Party and focus groups polling, they just say, you know what? I'm out of this conversation, not interested. 14 years, not interested. And I think, you know, Rishi Sunak presented himself as a change candidate, somebody that was going to be fundamentally different from Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. If you look at the polling figures, he's clearly failed to cut through in that respect. 51% saying, I'm not interested, even if the party's under Penny Mordaunt, even if it's under Boris Johnson, even if it's under Nigel Farage, I'm just not interested. So I think what we've got here is an enormous hole in British politics, and also, by the way, an enormous opportunity. I mean, if I was Nigel Farage, I'd be thinking, why would I go to a brand that's utterly toxic and problematic? Why wouldn't I go into the Reform Party? Why wouldn't I try and take that, you know, as we saw in the polling that we've just given to you, you know, the Reform Party is now on 12%, but we know that up to 16% of Brits would consider voting for it. So if I was Nigel Farage, I'd be saying, well, my chances with Reform are better than with the Conservative Party, so why wouldn't I just go and do that?
Yeah, that is really interesting, because I was with Nigel at the Conservative Party conference, and we kind of really...
I saw it, I remember.
We kind of farmed up a little bit of a rumour, really, about, is he going to join the Tories? And Rishi Sunak even commented on it, the Prime Minister. And, obviously, it looks as though, according to your data, that he is better just kind of going it alone on reform.
Well, just on that briefly, Patrick, because it's important. Yeah. Go back to the early 1990s in Canada. There was a Reform Party, the Reform Party of Canada, that replaced the Conservatives in 1993. And I think if I was Nigel Farage, I'd be looking at these numbers and thinking, we are 7 points behind the Conservatives. What happens if before the next general election Reform are polling above the Conservatives? Not impossible. The Brexit Party almost did it in 2019. If that happens, all bets are off. Then you're looking at what I would call a full-blown realignment of the right in British politics. It's happened on two occasions before. Canada in the 1990s, the Labour Party replacing the Liberals in the early 20th century. It could happen again.
Matt Goodwin, thank you very, very much, as ever. Always a great way to start that show with that exclusive polling data. It did also appear, didn't it, in that polling data, that it reiterated another GBNews exclusive that we brought to you, which is that there appears to be some plot to replace Rishi Sunak with Penny Mordaunt, the leader of the House of Commons. Now, she's reportedly at the centre of this plot. Well, remarkably, she was full of praise for the Prime Minister today.
He has shown global leadership on many challenges facing this country. He's a wonderful dad. He gives quietly to charities. He runs for his local hospice. He doesn't just get Britain, he represents the best of Great Britain. The greatest things we have to offer and what they mean to the world and our values: hard work, enterprise, taking personal responsibility for yourself and helping others. He is in no way confused about where his duties lies.
OK, there we go. So the polling data that Matthew Goodwin just provided to us here exclusively at GB News said that, realistically, Penny Mordaunt, of the serving Conservatives at the moment, is actually the #1 choice for voters to replace Rishi Sunak. Are you buying all of this, though? Let's get the thoughts of my panellists, GB News presenter and contributor Emily Carver, got Conservative peer Lord Bailey, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Heck of a lot to get stuck into with this polling data here at the moment. What stood out for you the most, do you think, there, Emily? What was big for you?
Well, it was quite interesting what Matt Goodwin had to say there about reform, the Reform Party potentially overtaking and replacing the Conservative Party. It's quite hard to believe after the success that the Conservative Party has had over the years, but anything is possible. It does seem that the Conservative brand is simply just viewed as toxic.
Sean, what are you hearing behind the scenes, then? This idea that Penny Mordaunt might be parachuted in. Is there any truth to that, do you think?
I certainly haven't heard anything about that, and if it'd be the most ridiculous thing in the world. You've just heard Emily say that the brand is struggling and Reform are on the march and could take over. Swapping Prime Minister again would just confirm everybody's idea that, this is pandemonium, let's move on. I haven't heard it. I don't think it's true. But I think the most important thing for Conservatives now is to look at the demographic change in the country. We should be worried about the strength of Reform. I want to be clear. I think the polls will close massively. When people start to look at Keir Starmer, I think, hold on a second, it's a little bit empty here. But what Reform could do is hollow out the Conservatives enough to give Labour a big win. Those figures would suggest a 400-seat majority for Labour. I think the last time that happened was in the 50s. I think Rishi now needs to look, and he needs to be more Conservative, and he needs to do it quickly.
OK, all right. Now, Amy, there's no point in skirting around the issue. Labour 25 points ahead. It's been about that for quite a while now. Your thoughts on that? And also, if I may, your thoughts on this idea that only 17% of Brits, and when you take that to the 18 to 24s, only 14% of Brits would actively fight for Britain at a time of war.
Does that really surprise you? I mean, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. Would you, Emily? Would you, Sean? I wouldn't.
I would. My family's here.
If it came down to it, the question was
if it came down to it.
Well, if there was a war, otherwise you're just fighting yourself, aren't you?
Would we fight to defend our
But
country?
I don't think that's surprising. It was the same case in World War I. People did not want to sign up. World War II was slightly different, but I think it's more reflective of how we feel about our country at the moment,
Would you
how
fight
we
for
feel
Britain?
about our government.
Would you fight for
I don't know. I would hope I wouldn't have to. I have got a kid that I have to look after, so, he probably wouldn't be that well off if I suddenly went to war. 30% of people have faith in our government. That is so low. So it doesn't surprise me that people aren't feeling like super enthusiastic about
But there's a difference. If
line.
someone said, let's be clear, I'm a Conservative peer. If someone said to me, would I go to war for the Conservative Party, I'd have to think about that. But we're talking about the country. There's a difference between the country and the government.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
No, but the point I want to make, our young people have been educated to hate the country in many different ways.
Nonsense.
It's true. You go on TikTok and see the amount of bile talked about the Western world in general and Britain in particular. Our children have been educated to that. Our children are regularly taught in school sometimes to hate the history of the country. So of course they don't like us.
Hate the history of the country or be aware of the history?
The only hope here, I guess, is that this is all theoretical and that when it actually came down to it and when there was actually, if and when there is an existential threat to our existence, that actually people would be willing to go out and fight. I hope as a woman I wouldn't have to do it. Thank you.
But you can only take their word for it. Look, would people fight? Who knows? But when they're asked the question, that answer reflects how they feel, and that's what makes it important. And again, I watch things on Twitter and all the rest of it, and think people are denigrating the country.
Hang on,
you want to
may I
sign
just
up
say
for that?
something? It gives me absolutely no pleasure to see the Conservatives polling at this, what looks like an historic low.
Amen.
So many missed opportunities.
But do you not
and
think
it's easy for the Reform Party to say, oh, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do this, we'll do that. A lot of it seems to be pie in the sky, so it gives me no pleasure.
But is this
They've
part
let us down.
of Reform's plan to then push the Conservative policies further to the right and then pull out the ballot at the last minute?
You say further to the right. With respect, you say further to the right. We've got the highest tax burden since World War II. We're going to allow illegal migrants to work. We've got record levels of net migration and record levels of illegal immigration. They're not on the right. They talk about being on the right wing, but then everyone who's done that has gone now.
Well, I think you've just answered the question then. So if Reform can put the pressure, if those numbers can put the pressure on the Conservative Party to
I think it's too late. I get what you mean, but I think it's a little too late, as evidenced by when I was out and about earlier on in Southwark, which I'm looking forward to talking to you wonderful people about, which is about whether or not Brits should come first when it comes to social housing. But before that, coming up, after a top UN official says the UK needs to take responsibility for illegal migrants instead of flying them to Rwanda...
Let's build a wall or stop the boats, you mean?
Exactly. Those are fake responses that don't address even the problem of arrivals.
You're the problem, mate. You're the problem. So, is there literally no end to the small boats crisis? Conservative MP and PPS to the Home Secretary, James Sunderland, he joins me live very, very shortly. But up next, as it's revealed almost a quarter of English children are now obese at the end of primary school, are fat kids victims of child abuse? Former Shameless actress Tina Malone is disgusted by that notion, and she goes head-to-head with the Green Goddess, Diana Moran. This is Patrick Christys Tonight. It's not to be missed.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion.
Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Patrick Christys Tonight. We're only on GB News, and coming up, Tory MP James Sunderland, a Home Office insider, hits back at the UN for attacking the Rwanda plan. But first, it's time for our head-to-head. Now, a shocking new study has found that almost a quarter of kids aged 10 and 11 in England are obese, which NHS England say is a ticking health time bomb, which, I mean, it obviously is. So, if nothing changes, childhood obesity will cost society £8.7 billion in lifelong healthcare costs. But, of course, the big concern is the impact it has on the individual. So, the child becomes more at risk to illnesses like type 2 diabetes, to cancer, to mental health issues. There's a lot on the line here. So, why aren't parents doing more? You know, when you see a child that is absolutely massive, where is he or she getting that food from? Who's giving it to them? More often than not, it's the parents, isn't it? Tonight, I'm asking, are severely overweight kids the victims of child abuse? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, or tweet me at gbnews. While you're there, go and take part in our poll. I'll bring you the results very shortly. But now, we've been joined by none other than the former Shameless actress Tina Malone and the Green Goddess Diana Moran. Both of you, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Tina, I will start with you. Do you think it's child abuse when you see really, really, really overweight kids aged about 10 or 11?
I think it's obscene to say that about a child and about the parents of a child. We're living in critical times. Things have got worse over the last 10, 20 years. People, mostly in poverty and deprivation, tend to have the larger children. And if you look at something like, for example, this bar of chocolate compared to this strawberry, compare the price. The most expensive item is the strawberry. So where are the incentives as acknowledgement of health? Most people eat, and I know, being a fat bird for 18 years, most people overeat, and I was morbidly and clinically overweight, obese, morbidly obese, and I've lost 12 stone 4 pounds. Obviously, I used a tool. I used gastric band. But the thing is, you cannot put parents in that category. People are impoverished, in deprivation. Okay. I mean, how much more are we going to throw at the working classes?
I'll come back to you, Tina.
We should encourage them to spend less in takeaways and more on fresh fruit. But then again, give them better wages.
All right, Tina, I'm going to come back to you. We've got time to come back to you. Diana, I'll bring you in now. Green Goddess, where are you on this then? You know, there is a school of thought that does say that when really young children are morbidly obese, that is the fault of the parents.
Well, I do think that the parents have got an awful lot to answer for. I mean, let's be careful here. Let's be cautious. There is, of course, a genetic inheritance. There could be hormonal reasons, and they could, of course, be on medications. But apart from all that, my observation is that children these days aren't being as active as children used to be. It's not being encouraged in schools as much as it was. All the PT that we did regularly every day, and then all those after-school activities, which was competition and also keeping a child's body strong and safe. We haven't got that incentive anymore, and that worries me that the parents aren't encouraging their children to do that. Instead, they're allowing their children to either go up to their bedrooms in the corner of a room, stuck in front of their mobile phone all the time, and they're not moving their bodies. And I worry for the future, because this is going to cost this country one hell of a lot of money, and those children aren't going to be fit enough to work.
Okay.
That's what really.
Well,
that's
true. That's true. I mean, these are the benefits getters of the future, Tina, aren't they? And I understand what you were saying about the price of food, right? And that is an argument that's wheeled out. But it doesn't cost anything to make your kid do a few sit-ups, does it?
To cook. Yeah, but the thing is, right, to go out and get meat and 2 veg like we did post-war, I cook every night, right? Now, I know my daughter will eat peppers, my 10-year-old will eat peppers, olives, fresh fruit every day. But a lot of people, Patrick, can't afford to do that. I've got a friend who works full-time with 2 babies and a teenager. She
are free,
does
Tina.
everything.
Tina, doing a few press-ups, it's free.
No, listen, it's an accumulation of everything. We need people to be on the right track mentally and to enable them to focus on educating and cooking and time. You've got to remember, processed foods and takeaways are quick, snappy. And we live in a society that says, get everything now. Okay. Instead of sitting at home at the table, having dinner together. And it's like Diane said, this active thing. I'm active, therefore my child is. What's in the cats and the kittens? You can also be predisposed, like she said, rightly so, to being genetically overweight. What we need to do is help people, not abuse them or call them out.
Look, Diana, do you think it's lazy for some parents to just throw their hands up and go, I'm overworked, these turkey Twizzlers cost £1, but a stir-fry costs £2 and all of this stuff? I mean, is that lazy? Actually, also as well, can I ask, do you think it's selfish for the future of society? Because they are going to be essentially spawning children that are going to have to get a load of cow on the NHS, might not be able to work. I mean, is there any issues there with the parenting for you, Diana?
I think that the parents have got to answer, and they've got to, if they're good parents, they want the best for their children, don't they? They want to see their children achieve. And if their children are obese, excuse me, you've had your time. Excuse me for saying so, but surely the parents should therefore seek medical help to help those children get more advice on food activity. And those parents have got possibly lack of cookery skills. Perhaps it's time they went back to school themselves.
Okay.
But Diane, the thing is, that isn't available. The NHS is in a crisis. Have you tried getting counselling or any education or information as a working single parent, which a lot of these people are, right? They haven't, it's not just about time and wanting to be, nobody goes up and says, I want to be a bad parent.
Do we have to teach everyone everything, though? You know, Diana, what do you make of that? The idea that we need to help people more to teach them arguably some basics. Is that a bit helpless, or is that what a kind society would do?
That's what a kind society will do and should do. Surely, if we have children, our first responsibility is to those children to get as much advice as we can do from wherever we can do. Certainly, start with the medical profession.
OK, look, both of you,
totally agree, Diane.
We've managed to come full circle here. We've gone from rip-roaring head-to-head to a point of agreement, and I love to see it. Thank you very, very much, both of you. As former Shameless actress Tina Malone there and Green Goddess Diana Moran. So, look, who do you agree with, OK? Almost a quarter of English children are now obese at the end of primary school. Are fat kids a victim of child abuse? Carl on X says, parents need to take more notice and control of their children. Nikki also says, no, they are victims of food production companies, which make hyper-processed, addictive rubbish that's cheaper to buy than meat, fruit and veg. Darren says overweight kids are wrapped in cotton wool and assured that it's not their fault that they constantly eat bad food. So a range of views there. Your verdict is now in. 60% of you agree that fat kids are victims of child abuse. 40% of you say they are not. Well, where's the natural extension there, then? Do we then prosecute parents for having morbidly obese children? Is that where this ends? But look, hey, coming up, with a history of forced hospital admissions and a warrant out for his arrest, why was Nottingham triple killer Valdo Calacane let loose on our streets? The victims' families simply can't understand it.
You have blood on your hands. If you had just done your jobs properly, there's a very good chance my beautiful boy would be alive today.
Absolutely horrendous. Former Prisons Minister Anne Widdecombe joins me to give her unrivalled insight into that tragic case next. But first, the president of the ECHR claims the Rwanda plan is unlawful, while a top UN official slams the government's Stop the Boats policy as a fake response. So is mass migration something Brits simply now have to accept? I would argue definitely not. PPS to the Home Secretary, James Sunderland MP, joins me live next as Britain's borders continue to take a battering by foreigners. This is Patrick Christys Tonight, and it's only on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Patrick Christys Tonight. I'm only on GB News. No nonsense Anne Widdecombe is waiting in the wings. But first, we tackle the migrant crisis with Parliamentary Private Secretary to the Home Secretary, James Sunderland MP. And the Prime Minister suffered a double blow today. So first, the President of the ECHR claimed that the government's Rwanda plan is unlawful. Then, the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, also stuck his boot into our Stop the Boats policy, accusing the UK of abdicating their responsibilities. So here's Mr Grandi speaking to the BBC earlier today.
Let's build a wall or stop the boats, you mean?
Exactly. Those are fake responses that don't address even the problem of arrivals. Yeah, it is true that there is pressure from electorates, but that pressure is largely induced by politicians that are fueling it and manipulating it, often through a whole set of fake news to gain votes.
Oh my gosh. Listening to that, it's no surprise that former Home Secretary Suella Braverman was practically begging the UN, begging that guy to change the definition of what a refugee is in Washington last year.
Where individuals are being persecuted, it is right that we offer sanctuary. But we will not be able to sustain an asylum system if, in effect, simply being gay or a woman or fearful of discrimination in your country of origin is sufficient to qualify for protection.
It is seriously worth remembering, in light of that chump's comments, OK, that Suella Braverman stood there and said to the world, unless we change what the definition of a refugee is, simply saying that you're gay or being a woman or fearing any kind of persecution or coming, frankly, from a poorer country to a wealthier country is basically all that you need to qualify as a refugee. That's what needs to be changed. And alas, here we are. Mr Sunderland, welcome to the show. Britain's borders continue to be breached. The UN are basically telling us to get on with it. What do you make of what that guy said? I mean, he's the problem, isn't he? Do we just have to accept record levels of illegal immigration now?
No, it's complete nonsense. I mean, 2 points for you, first of all. Firstly, Rwanda currently, as of September last year, had 130,000 refugees, displaced personnel there. So it's clearly good enough for the UN, it's good enough for us, and it's a great country. I have been there. The second thing, of course, is the fact that this notion that the UK is somehow responsible for the world's migrants is absolute tosh. We have a problem right now with small boats coming across. We've got a problem with people, mainly migrants. These are not asylum seekers, they're not refugees, they're mainly economic migrants coming to the UK for a better life. Who would blame them? But my point is this. Can't absorb the numbers that we're seeing at the moment, and it's absolutely right that the British government is focused on stopping the boats.
What Filippo was saying there was that, you know, oh, look, this is all just political pressure. Nothing's actually, you know, being done about this, and nor should we do anything about it. Suella Braverman stood up and made the point that unless we change the law and the definition of what it meant to be a refugee, frankly, pretty much anyone from anywhere can move anywhere else, and there's very little we can do about it. The United Nations take the polar opposite view to that. I mean, as long as they've got any say in this matter, we're knackered, aren't we?
Well, the United Nations, of course, depends upon countries like the UK taking their fair share of displaced persons. But that's not necessarily what should be happening. So, for example, there are known to be millions of people on the move right now across Africa, across the rest of the world. And we are seeing a significant problem in Europe. So What's interesting is that European countries within the European Union are looking right now at the UK, at what the UK is doing in law, and trying to copy it. And we are seeing a shift right across Europe towards right-wing governments because the problem has to be dealt with.
So the fact is that the response to what's going on at the southern border in America, which is, by the way, absolutely insane, the level of illegal immigration that they've got over there, the response to unbelievable volumes of illegal immigration right through Europe and into Britain, from the United Nations, their response to that, as far as I can tell, is to now more or less openly say that they don't believe in borders. Is the UN fit for purpose?
In that respect, no, not at all. But borders have to matter. Borders have to be maintained. We've got to maintain security of our borders. We've got no idea who these people are coming across. And it's absolutely right that in 2019, as part of the Brexit decision, we undertook to secure our borders. That is absolutely what the Conservative government's going to do. Look at Labour. Without getting too political, Labour have voted against every single measure to curb illegal migration. Every single one. Labour wants open borders. Fact. If Keir Starmer has his way, we'll go back into the European Union agreement whereby we'd be legally obliged to take over 100,000 migrants every year. It can't happen. It must not happen. We have undertaken to secure our borders to stop the small boats. That is exactly what the Prime Minister is going to do.
Look, Keir Starmer obviously will absolutely categorically deny that he wants open borders. The Labour Party have denied that on numerous occasions. I just wonder if there's an even bigger problem here behind the scenes. You've got the United Nations there, which essentially I think sees itself wrongly, in my view, as the charitable arm to the world. The idea that the good thing to do for the sake of charity, reinforced, by the way, I think by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, reinforced by what we're seeing at the ECHR, reinforced by a huge number of different aid groups and so-called worthy charities, is that people should just be allowed to travel legally or illegally anywhere they like around the world. You know, do we have a problem behind the scenes here a bit as well with some of these charities, with some of these so-called aid organisations?
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer is yes. I mean, it cannot be the case that the UK is responsible for the world's migrants. No Western country can do that. The pressure on services at the moment is already acute. The very same people that phone me and say, oh, we must have open borders, and the same people that say they can't get an appointment at a surgery. I don't want to demonise the problem, but my point is that actually we cannot absorb the numbers that are currently on the move. I have every sympathy with people wanting a better life. I've served myself for 26 years in the army. I've been to many, many countries across the world that really aren't fit for purpose. What we have in the UK is absolutely fantastic. We've got problems, yes, we have, but actually the offer's brilliant. But the point I'm making is that we cannot be beholden across Western countries to absorb the numbers that we're talking about.
How does this pan out? How does this pan out for you personally now, then, right? Because you're saying all the right things to a lot of our viewers and our listeners here. But with respect, James, we just played a clip of a former Home Secretary there who stood up and said things that I think you agree with, right, that are correct. We have a current Home Secretary who seems a lot more reluctant to do things like get us out of the ECHR, has supposedly called the Rwanda plan batshit. I mean, he denies that, but, you know, supposedly has said that. You know, how do you work under that bloke, James Cleverly, now, if he's not doing the right things or saying what's necessary? We've established that it's necessary to do certain things. It doesn't look like he wants to do that.
I work for both Suella and for James. I was their PPS and I am James' PPS now. Different people, different styles. I mean, neither are wrong in what they say, but of course the approach is different. And what I would say at the moment is that the position the British government's taken is not a reflection of Suella Braverman, or it's not a reflection of James Cleverly. It's a reflection of what the Prime Minister is able to do. And what I mean by that is this. Where he's put the marker in the sand is absolutely clear. This is what the Rwandan government will tolerate at the moment. We've gone as far to the right as we can. The other thing is the Rwanda bill that's just gone through the House of Commons is the most right-leaning, draconian, if that's the right word, fierce, bold, ambitious legislation in this field ever. It disapplies Section 1, 2, 3, 5, and so on of the Human Rights Act. But what the Prime Minister is not going to do right now is effectively fail the centrists and the left wing of the party by leaving the European Court of Human Rights. And that's the right thing to do.
All right, look, James, thank you very much for your time this evening. Always a pleasure. It's James Sunderland, MP there. I know plenty of you will agree with that. I know plenty of you will not agree with it. Get your views coming in. GBviews at gbnews.com coming up. As charities and even government insiders attack the Tories' new social housing policy, why is there anything controversial about promising British homes for British workers? I think it's just common sense, isn't it? I'll get stuck into that in 10, but next, as it's revealed that there was a history of forced hospital admissions, a warrant out for his arrest. Does the case of the Nottingham triple killer Valdo Calacani expose serious failings in our police force? Anne Widdecombe joins me now, former Prisons Minister. She'll be live in just a tick. Patrick Christys tonight. We're only on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
This is Patrick Christys Tonight, only on GB News. Now, the Nottingham triple killer, Valdo Calacani, has been sentenced to be detained indefinitely at a high-security hospital after admitting the manslaughter of two university students, O'Malley Kumar and Barnaby Webber, and school caretaker Ian Coates in June last year. New CCTV footage released today shows Barnaby and Grace walking home after a night out before they were brutally attacked and killed. Shortly afterwards, he went on to stab his third victim, Ian Coates. Now, reacting to the sentencing today, the victim's family slammed the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. We can watch and listen now.
True justice has not been served today. We as a devastated family have been let down by multiple agency failings and ineffectiveness. To the Assistant Chief Constable, Rob Griffin, you have blood on your hands. If you had just done your jobs properly, there's a very good chance my beautiful boy would be alive today.
And they've raised questions as to why Calacani wasn't stopped earlier, given that he was arrested twice, sectioned and hospitalised in 2020. The following year, he was sectioned again, and in September 2022, a warrant was issued for his arrest. That warrant was still outstanding when he went on his fatal killing spree. The victims' families were also highly critical of the Crown Prosecution Service for bringing manslaughter charges instead of murder, citing the killer's premeditated planning, his collection of lethal weapons and the brutality of the attacks as more than enough evidence for murder charges. I'm joined now by former Prisons Minister Anne Widdecombe. Anne, have the victims been failed here? How on earth was this guy allowed to kill again and not be found guilty of murder?
Well, of course they've been let down. They've been let down very badly. But although I very rarely have anything good to say about the CPS, it is not their fault. They've got a paranoid schizophrenic. That's what this man is, a paranoid schizophrenic. Now, to be charged with murder, you've got to have what is called mens rea. That is, you've got to know what you're doing at the time. You've got to be mentally competent. If they had charged him with murder, the chances are quite high that he would have been found not guilty either by the jury or on appeal. They were right to go for manslaughter because you can, if you get a conviction for manslaughter, as has been done, keep that person behind bars, in this case in a secure mental hospital, for life. So you can do that. They were right to do that. I don't often stand up for the CPS, but on this case I do. But they've been massively failed, the victims, by the mental health services. I mean, we all know that if you have a paranoid schizophrenic who takes their medicine, they can be managed perfectly easily. All is well. If they don't take their medicine, they have psychotic episodes. And when they have psychotic episodes, what may happen is beyond imagination. And in this case, that is exactly what did happen. Now, he should have been detained and he should not have been released. And I do not know what conferences took place. Doubtless we shall find out.
Well,
I do not know what happened, but whatever happened,
I can't help but wonder, Anne, when we're dealing with somebody here who's been arrested twice, sectioned, hospitalised, the following year sectioned again, a warrant out for his arrest. I just can't help but wonder whether or not it's very convenient for the police and all the services involved to say, let's do him for manslaughter because the murder charge and then potential conviction sounds worse and it makes us more culpable.
No, I mean, I'm not convinced that a murder charge would have actually stuck. I'm not convinced that he wouldn't have got himself off, at least on appeal, because the law is clear. You've got to be mentally competent to be guilty of murder, but you can still get him locked up for life for manslaughter, and that is the practical option. What is not the practical option is that somebody with his record should have been free in the community, seemingly without much supervision even.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. Look, I'm just going to play a little clip now from Assistant Chief Constable Rob Griffin. Sorry, it's a statement, actually. He said, I've personally reviewed this matter and we should have done more to arrest him. However, because of the circumstance prevailing at the time of the alleged assault, in my opinion, it is highly unlikely that he would have received a custodial sentence. So, obviously echoing what you were saying there, do you think that the public feel as though justice has been done here? I mean, the family don't, clearly.
Well, I don't know how the public feel. I do understand the reaction of the relatives. That's understandable. But if you stand back and ask yourself, what gave you the maximum chance of getting this man locked up for life, it would have been a manslaughter charge. Can
I just ask you quickly on something here, which a lot of people are skirting around? We were the first news channel to break the news that this individual was a migrant with a history of violence who was known to police. And we're the only news channel that did that for quite some time, actually. There are question marks as to whether or not he should have even been in the country. I know he lived here for a very long time, though. I'm just keen to get your views on that.
Well, obviously, you've got to have much better control of the borders. We all know that. Much better control of individual assessments, much better control of who comes here and who doesn't. He had been here a long time. Okay. I think, therefore, it's not as if we just admitted somebody who came immediately with that record. The other thing is, of course, the warrant for his arrest was because he'd assaulted a police officer, and the police may well have just thought, we got other priorities.
And thank you very, very much. Former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe there. Next. With The Guardian, charities and even the government insiders attacking Number 10's new social housing policy, shouldn't we be celebrating the promise of British homes for British workers? I give my take just after 10. This is Patrick Christys Tonight, only on GB News.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Good evening. After a fairly cloudy but mild Thursday, Friday looks much brighter, with most of us seeing some sunny spells. A couple of weather fronts to swing across the country, though, tonight. This one's already bringing cloud and rain to parts of northern England and Wales, and this one will bring a band of quite heavy rain that'll zip across Scotland and Northern Ireland this evening. And the gusts will suddenly pick up as that rain band moves across, and it will then spread across most of England and Wales from west to east. So we'll all see some rain through the night, but tending to become dry for most by dawn. Turning quite cold across northern Scotland. Some icy conditions possible here, and the showers will turn wintry. Some snow on the higher routes for sure through the night and first thing in the morning. Elsewhere, though, it's a bright and breezy kind of day. Some early rain across Kent should be gone by sunrise, and then generally, as I said, a fine day with more sunshine than today. Showers will continue to come into western parts of Scotland, and temperatures will be lower than today, won't be as mild, but these numbers pretty close to the average for the time of year. Turning a bit cold on Friday night in the south, some pockets of frost possible on Saturday. Again, outbreaks of rain across the northwest of Scotland. Quite windy here on Saturday too. The breeze picking up elsewhere in the west. A bit more cloud perhaps on Saturday, but still, for most, it looks largely dry and bright, and temperatures up to 9 or 10 degrees Celsius. Goodbye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys Tonight. Who do you trust to tackle the national epidemic that is knife crime? The Tories or Labour? Here's Yvette Cooper's pitch.
There have to be urgent intervention programmes. There has to be a proper referral to the youth offending team. Even in the youngest of cases, there's got to be early action.
I'll reveal how Keir Starmer justified sending a man to prison for defending his family against a knife-wielding maniac in his own home. Plus, do you think British nationals should be given priority housing? This guy does.
I think our main focus should be on those that have been born here, educated here.
It's time to put Brits first. I'll have all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages today with my press pack. On the panel tonight, it's GB News star Emily Carver, Lord Bailey and Amy Nicole-Turner. And what's wrong in this video? I'll tell you why that's landed fitness guru Joe Wicks in hot water very soon. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Next, I reveal who the most stupid anti-British people in Britain are.
Good evening. The top story from the GB Newsroom tonight. The son of murdered caretaker Ian Coates says NHS mental health services and the police must be held accountable after his father's killer was given a hospital order rather than a prison sentence. 32-year-old Valdo Calacane was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia when he killed Ian Coates and two Nottingham University students, Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar, in June last year. He pleaded not guilty to murder due to his mental condition, but did admit manslaughter. Speaking outside the court, the victim's family said the triple killer had made a mockery of the system and got away with murder. Barnaby Webber's mother, Emma, said they trusted the system, but it had failed them.
At no point during the previous 5.5 months were we given any indication that this could conclude in anything other than murder. We trusted in our system, foolishly as it turns out. We do not dispute that the murderer is mentally unwell and has been for a number of years. However, the premeditated planning, the collection of lethal weapons, hiding in the shadows and the brutality of the attacks are of an individual who knew exactly what he was doing. He knew entirely that it was wrong, but he did it anyway.
Emma Webber, the mother of Barnaby, outside Nottingham Crown Court today. Well, the government has responded and been defending its record on tackling knife crime in a third crackdown in 8 years. The Home Secretary saying today the new restrictions are aimed at closing what he calls a loophole, which allows some types of so-called zombie knives to be kept and sold. And while Labour says the new legislation doesn't go far enough and there need to be tougher penalties, James Cleverly says the government is making the right noises.
I became Home Secretary. I made the immediate decision to go further, to put forward this secondary legislation to support what we've already done, to make the possession of zombie knives illegal and to close the loophole. So I'm very pleased we're taking action now. We have seen a reduction in crime. We have a plan to drive it down further. That plan is working. We're determined to take these knives off the streets.
James Cleverly. Now, in the United States, a convicted killer is due to be put to death in what's been described as a cruel and untested method of capital punishment. 58-year-old Kenneth Smith, who was convicted of murder in 1988, has already avoided one execution after a failed lethal injection. The state of Alabama will carry out the first execution of a prisoner using asphyxiation with nitrogen gas, the state hoping the new method will be a simpler alternative to previous methods, with the authorities describing it as the most painless and humane method of execution known to man. 3 people have been arrested for allegedly posing as immigration lawyers, helping through false asylum claims, and all from a garage in Manchester. The Home Office has revealed that the suspects, including a married couple, were charging over £3,000 per client for fake documents. It's understood those arrested were British and Chinese nationals. The government says it will be relentless in finding those abusing the immigration system for profit. And lastly, 2 statues marking Australia's colonial history have been vandalised in Melbourne as the country prepares to mark its annual Australia Day. Police are investigating after a century-old statue of Captain Cook was sawn off at the ankles in a popular Melbourne park. The monument was also graffitied with the words, "The colony will fall." In addition, a statue of Queen Victoria in the city centre was covered in red paint. Tomorrow, Australia Day commemorates the arrival of the first fleet of British ships to the continent in 1788. Australia's government said the statues will be restored after recently ruling out in a referendum on becoming a republic. And that's the news on GB News, across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker. This is Britain's News Channel.
There is nothing controversial about wanting to prioritise British homes for British workers. In fact, I'll tell you what I think is controversial. British soldiers sleeping on the streets and British taxpayers paying the highest tax burden since World War II to subsidise people who have just arrived in this country. It's controversial that we've completely shattered the social contract in Britain. Maybe The Guardian could start with that before they carp on about a policy that, shock horror, would see a British government prioritise people who were born in Britain. So, the Tories want to look into fast-tracking British citizens into social housing. Good. In Brent, 40% of new social homes were let to foreign nationals in 2021 to 2022. 40%. Data from the Office for National Statistics shows right across the country, 19.2% of social housing occupants are foreign-born. That rises to 47.6% in London, reportedly. Why on earth are we letting so many people into this country who clearly cannot support themselves? That's a heck of a lot of brain surgeons, cardiologists and engineers who've fallen on hard times, isn't it? The Guardian think it's controversial to want to put Brits first. Well, what kind of people think mass immigration of 700,000 a year is a good thing? Well, the usual Labour or Lib Dem Guardian reading lovies, isn't it? OK, we need to build more houses. Who's blocking the planning applications? The Guardian-loving Liberal Democrats. If there's a whiff of a housing development in your local area, it's a matter of seconds before someone wearing socks, sandals and an EU beret, brandishing a yellow rosette, turns up to tell you that if you vote for them, they'll block it. They are the problem. They don't want us to put Brits first. They don't want us to reduce immigration. They don't want us to build more social housing in their local areas. Oh, no. Oh, we care about the poor, but not so much that we want them in our area. We wouldn't want to have to smell them if we were downwind from their council tower. I went to Southwark today, where 29% of social housing is going to people born abroad, to actually speak to normal people about whether they thought it was controversial to have British homes for British workers.
We're struggling in this country with homeless people. You can see outside Southwark Station there's homeless people here as well. I think our main focus should be on those that have been born here, educated here.
Any sane person looking into this country from the outside world would say the same. Indeed, this Dutch man did.
I know only the situation in Holland. People are waiting 10 years or 12 years for a social house, and other people come in the country and within a few months they have a house. So that's not fair, I think.
And obviously, the uncomfortable truth, especially for certain members of the Labour Party, is that people get some kind of social housing, then their circumstances change, and they just clog up the system by refusing to move out.
Social housing, it's not reviewed, so you could have a social house, find yourself in a better position, but not actually be reviewed to say, actually, you're not now eligible for this, which I think we really need to look at. Back in my earlier part of my life, I was in social housing, and it really allowed me to kind of, you know, have that opportunity to move out of home and have that thing. So I really think it's important that actually we need to be able to offer it for everybody, but there needs to be a fair assessment with how we can do that.
Apparently, the lawyers are already saying putting Brits first would fall foul of equalities law. Why is it that equalities law always seems to put the indigenous population last? The only people who think it's controversial to have a policy that would prioritise giving British people homes over people who have just arrived in this country are thick as mints, smarmy, nation-hating, virtue-signalling hypocrites whose own ridiculous ideology has caused the mess that they are now complaining about. But to respond now, I'm joined again by GB News presenter and contributor Emily Carver, Conservative peer Lord Bailey, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner. Emily, do you think it's controversial to want to give Brits priority when it comes to social housing?
No, I don't. And I do think the write-up of this story by The Guardian is quite curious. Firstly, they seem to contradict themselves throughout on various points, but mostly because I don't understand why the charity Shelter has decided to lend a quote to this article that is so forthright. They're really giving the government a kicking before we even know what the actual proposal is here from the government, before it's been consulting on. They're so quick to leap on this and say it's nothing more than scapegoating at its worst and it's unjust and all of this, when I'm thinking, actually, as the article does talk about, Gordon Brown tried to do something quite similar. So it does seem that there is a bit of a cross-party consensus, at least, that British people should probably have priority.
Doesn't this just show you, at the faintest whiff that a national government might do something that might prioritise its own nationals, all of a sudden the Guardian are up in arms, the charities are up in arms, the usual types are up in arms. You think, we haven't even done it yet, lads.
I think there's two things I'd say about this. Firstly, most people will be surprised that British people are not top of the list. Housing is obviously distributed on need, and they would assume that the need here, we constantly talk about a housing crisis. I know many people who live in very, very unsecure situations. They would think, they'd assume that they'd be ahead of that list. If you compare us to France, for instance, in France, you cannot receive any sort of benefits until you've paid into the system for a while. So when you see that people can potentially jump the queue, you might see why we're so attractive to other people. But the important thing to say here is that the lack of social housing, the pain isn't felt equally. Certain communities have a real problem with housing, and other communities have no problem with housing, but it's those communities who get to comment the most about housing. And I think that's where you have a problem. If you spoke to most people, they would probably agree with this, and they wouldn't make it about race. Particularly in London, you've got black, white, green, blue, everybody waiting for housing. I think people will be surprised that this isn't already the case.
Green and blue. Well,
green and blue.
But, I mean, Amy, we clearly have a heck of a lot of brain surgeons, cardiologists and engineers who've now fallen on hard times and need social housing.
That's a silly thing to say, because we're not talking about the people who... I take it you're talking about the illegal immigrants.
No, I'm talking about
migrants coming across.
No, because people who can apply really for social housing are people who've either been guaranteed or granted refugee status or legal immigrants.
No.
Right? Well, so this is a problem, isn't it?
Hang on, that's really misleading. I think the reason this is so controversial is because it's giving the impression that this is actually happening. The example of Brent is an outlier. Most of the time...
Far outlier. Get on the road to Southwark.
The people who are being given social housing are people with settled status, that have been given refugee status, that's asylum claims have been successful. So, yeah, we are giving them housing. But actually, the real thing that's happening is we're not giving anyone housing.
Do you think those...
We have a housing crisis. There are so many people that are waiting for housing.
Point, Amy,
and that's why, that's why I think Shelter are getting involved, because this is a homelessness problem. 49p of every pound spent in Eastbourne Council, for example, was spent on temporary accommodation. There's not enough social housing across the board.
Okay.
I take your point on that, and perhaps this won't actually be workable under the various equalities legislation
which is ridiculous.
That we have, and that is mentioned in the write-up too, that may be the case. But does it not... Do you not see that there might be an injustice? The other day, we were walking past a man who was sleeping on the side of the road, a British guy who was there, clearly no roof over his head. Yes, I don't know his story. Maybe he was a nasty, horrible man who'd ruined his life or whatever else. But just to think that people who have just come over might be given priority when it comes to social housing. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have access to housing, but when it comes to social housing, which is so sought after in this country, surely whether you've lived in an area for a long time should count.
OK, one, you don't know his nationality, so he could be one of these foreign nationals that we're talking about.
We did hear him talking, I do take your point.
Two, the main injustice is the state of social housing. Grenfell Tower, that was social housing. Do you know the number of people that were foreign nationals within Grenfell Tower? The thing we should be focusing on is the lack and the standard of social housing on offer, not quibbling about who's in it.
You absolutely need to quibble who gets access to that housing, because it's a finite resource. And the way we've been handling immigration... Look, the Chief Executive of Shelter says these people didn't create the social housing need.
Yeah, of course they did.
She's completely right, but they are part of the problem we have to overcome. So therefore, we should be helping people.
The reason this is...
We should be helping people in order that they arrive, because if you arrive with the same amount of need as someone's here, but you beat them in a queue, that feels unjust.
It's not about a queue, and it's not about beating anyone in a queue. This is controversial because it says you don't have a house because of that foreigner, not you don't have a house because we haven't built any, and we sold them all off.
Amy, in some cases, that is literally true. That is literally true in some cases. In some cases, British people will not have a house because it has been given to a foreign national.
But it's always done in need. So if you had a family with kids over an individual person, of course they would give it to the family.
Let's say I lived alone, right, and I'd fallen on hard times. Then all of a sudden, someone who's just rocked up in this country, but they've got 2 kids, they get a house. I'm sorry.
But Patrick, why have they rocked up? Why have they rocked up? They've rocked up because they have an asylum claim. So are they not as deserving? They probably served with our forces in Afghanistan. They've come here, settled status.
You don't know
the majority
Hold on. The thing I say, if you've arrived yesterday or you've been here 25 years, your need for social housing, if you've both got kids, is no different. And so if you prioritise people who haven't been in the queue, and believe you me, there absolutely is a queue, a very, very long queue, it feels unjust. Nobody is saying people shouldn't be housed. What people are saying is there should be a bit more of a look at who's in the queue when it happens.
The queue
and let's be clear, the government have given, just London alone, have given London over £8 billion to build social housing in the last 6 years.
What I will say is this isn't going to solve the housing crisis.
No, it's not.
That's why I think it's controversial. It's unnecessary.
All right, OK, all of you, thank you very much. A rip-roaring start to the hour. Coming up, with Britain's married population falling below 50% for the first time, is Britain suffering from a severe lack of stable families? We're going to be debating that in my press pack. That's one of the inside stories. But next, as both of Britain's political parties announce fresh plans to cut down the scourge of knife crime sweeping the nation's streets, who do you actually trust more to tackle the problem? Is it Labour or the Tories? Conservative MP, former Minister for London Paul Scully, goes up against Labour Councillor for Community Safety, Peymana Assad. That's after this very, very short break. You will not want to miss it.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Patrick Christys Tonight. We're only on GB News. My press pack return to run through the first of tomorrow's front pages very, very soon. But first, Britain's two biggest parties have been battling it out to bring down knife crime today. The government announced a crackdown on zombie knives, the blade that has increasingly been linked to gang crime and violence in the UK. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer vowed to slash knife crime by half. Here is Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper setting out Labour's plan.
There have to be urgent intervention programmes. There has to be a proper referral to the youth offending team. Even in the youngest of cases, there's got to be early action.
Well, while Labour may vow to get tough on blades, their existing record isn't much to write home about, with knife point robberies in London rising by 36% this year under Sadiq Khan, Labour. However, the Mayor of London, well, he's got an excuse for everything, hasn't he?
Why is London doing so badly on knife crime and knife robberies?
Well, the reason why the Commissioner and I convened mobile phone operators, manufacturers and platforms because actually the biggest personal robbery is of mobile phones.
Well, someone's just going to stick a knife to my throat now, are they? Is that what happens, mobile phones? I mean, you heard him right there. It's our fault for carrying mobile phones. And let's not forget that Keir Starmer himself rejected calls to toughen burglary laws after a homeowner was sent to prison for defending himself against knife-wielding burglars who had broken into his house and tied him up. To debate this, I'm joined now by former London Minister and Conservative MP Paul Scully and Labour councillor Peymana Assad. Thank you very much, both of you. Great to have you on the show. Paul, who can we trust more when it comes to sorting out knife crime? I mean, they do both seem pretty bad.
Look, you actually have to have national government and local government or regional government, in London's case, working together. You can't. It's a really complicated problem. But, you know, if we look at what the Labour Party have announced today, these are things that are already either in place or coming in place at the moment. Things like the orders they're talking about, the community protection notices, we're banning zombie knives. I was actually on the bill committee that went through the last iteration of this. I don't remember, and it's coming up at the time. So we've got to get rid of this loophole now. But it's really complicated. I just get sick of the Mayor of London keep shoveling the blame onto everybody else apart from him. If that's the case, what's the point of the Mayor?
Paul, can I just ask, what's the point of banning zombie knives? Somebody who wanted to get a zombie knife and then use it doesn't care about what the law is.
No, but I think we've got to ban the sale of it, and so that people actually selling the things can be thrown in prison as well. So the more you can take them out of the market, the better. But what you actually find is that a lot of the knife crime is dealt with by people who are just picking up a knife to keep themselves safe, and that's ridiculous. So that's why it's complicated, because you've got to get in really early and get that education piece, because once someone's got a knife, it's actually too late.
OK, Peymana, I'll bring you in now. Labour councillor, is it difficult to trust Labour when it comes to being tough on crime? We've seen there that Keir Starmer didn't want to toughen up burglary laws after a bloke defended himself in his own home against a knife-wielding man, and also, as well, has signed petitions to say that we don't really want criminals deported. I mean, can we actually trust Labour at all?
Well, here's the thing, Patrick. I think after 13 years of Conservative rule, we've seen underfunding in our NHS, cuts to our police, cuts to local councils. And over the last decade, the Tories had a chance to actually fix this problem, and they didn't. And, you know, Paul is right in terms of saying that prevention is one of the key factors in trying to tackle the knife crime issue. You know, you need to have good teachers, you need to have support in schools to be able to tackle this problem, but you also need to have support in local councils to try and do the prevention work if they catch young people carrying knives. And at the moment, local councils are so underfunded that they're going down to statutory services, which is making it much more difficult. I mean, if you look at it on a London-wide case, you know, 1 billion of cuts that the Tories have implemented, 130 youth service centres have been cut in London. And that in itself has impacted the knife crime situation. So I think that we can trust Labour, but we have to remember there is a government in power that has been in power for 13 years.
OK, all right, fine. Let's go. Paul's come back to that then. Paul, some quite scathing stuff about your party there.
Yeah, because look, you've got a mayor who's using stop and search less and less. You've got a mayor that's the de facto police commissioner for London, Sadiq Khan, who's who's failing to bring back that trust in the Met, to have the police around, to be able to recruit enough policemen on the door, on the streets, to be able to have that deterrent effect. So we're trialing technology to across the country to try and work on this. But we really need our police and crime commissioners, which we're seeing in other parts of the country affecting well. But we're really not seeing it in London, which is that it has a massive effect on families around London, has a massive effect on the country, and indeed our reputation across the world.
OK, now, look, Paimana, it's not just a London thing there, and I'm very keen. Most of our viewers are not in London, right? And most of our viewers who have played people in the West Midlands, we've got people in Greater Manchester, etc. All of these places under Labour councils, right, who are seeing massive, massive, massive knife crime incidents. I mean, is there not a theme here, really? I mean, can Labour just blame it all on us carrying mobile phones? I mean, you've got people saying, oh, it's a public health issue. Well, it's only a public health issue once people get stabbed, isn't it? It's a crime issue, really.
Well, I do think that there is a theme here. The theme is that we've had a Conservative government for 13 years, and that Conservative government has, over the last 13 years, cut funding to the police. We've seen so many police officers taken off our streets. I mean, I can talk about my ward, but I'm pretty sure that there are Labour councillors up and down this country who will tell you the same thing. You need to be tough on crime, but we need to also be tough on the causes of crime. You can't just underfund local services and expect that Labour councillors or Labour councils or councils in general will be able to tackle this issue. We need to be able to have the prevention and the intervention ability to do this. And young people are suffering up and down this country because of it. And I think unless we have that funding in place properly from national government, because 80% of funding for police, for example, just in London, comes from national government. 20% comes from regional government. So we need to look at the funding.
Just to clarify, have Labour said they're going to do that? Have Labour said they're going to do the things that you want to be done?
Well, Labour have committed to having town centre police teams. It's something that I want as a local councillor. Right. It's something that I want to see in my local area. They've also committed to investing 100 million to tackle knife crime. Knife crime is a huge issue and it's impacting every community. And we just keep looking at it. We keep looking at it like it's a normal thing and keep going forward. But we actually need to...
OK, Paimana, go on. Final word, Paul. Go on.
Yeah, I hate getting the bidding wars, but we've got £160 million going in. We've got a lot of these things happening. But yet again, we're hearing another Labour politician that's deflecting the blame to everybody apart from themselves. We devolve power. We want to see that power wielded properly to take knives off our street.
OK, both of you, thank you very, very much. Thank you. Great stuff, that. It's former London Minister, Conservative MP Paul Scully and Labour councillor Paimana Assad. Right, OK, serious issue. Who do you trust more when it comes to sorting out knife crime? I possibly suspect neither. But coming up, Britain's married population has fallen below 50% for the first time. Should we be concerned by the collapse of the nuclear family? Look, dare I say it, is that part of actually the issue we were talking before? You've got kids running around with knives and dealing drugs and all of this stuff. Do they do that if they've got a strong nuclear family? Some will, not all. But next, my press pack, join me to run through the first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages as they land. It's the liveliest paper review you will get anywhere on the telly. I've just had a little advanced sight of some of the front pages in the last break. Yeah, it's quite spicy stuff on there. It's Patrick Christys tonight. It's only on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. It's Patrick Christys Tonight, only on GB News. Now, it's time to bring you tomorrow's news in the most entertaining paper review you'll get anywhere on the telly. The very first front pages have just been delivered. We go to the Metro. Family's fury at stab spree sentence. No justice, they say. Schizophrenic triple knife killer to be held in hospital, probably for life. Yeah, absolute disgrace. Daily Express now, blood on their hands. A picture story there, of course, with the families and relatives of those people that triple killer did indeed kill. Just below that, Hunt. Today's tax cuts are just the start. Jeremy Hunt has vowed that tax cuts now hitting pay packets are just the start, as he promised that a brighter future is near. All right. The Daily Star. Up yours. As military top brass call for a citizens' army to face down Mad Vlad, 90% of you say we'd refuse to fight. Meanwhile, health chiefs say that Brits would be far too fat to be much use in a war. I do wonder what seriously, you know, the surviving World War II veterans in this country looking at the state of it at the moment and thinking that we've got people openly celebrating the fact that they wouldn't fight for Britain. Anyway, let's go to the Eye. Labour's tax trap. Starmer warned he must reverse Tory tax cuts or squeeze UK public services. Senior member of the Tony Blair cabinet, yeah, that's right, urges Keir Starmer not to prioritise or promise to match Tory tax plans. There you go. Isn't it remarkable? We could be going into an election with a party who thinks it is an election-winning strategy to reverse tax cuts that haven't happened yet. I mean, here we go. Anyway, so look, those are, of course, your front pages. I'm joined by my press pack. GB News presenter and contributor Emily Carver, Conservative peer Lord Bailey, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. We're going to delve inside one of the papers before we get stuck into some of the front pages, OK? It's a bombshell new data has revealed that the British married population has fallen below 50% for the first time, while the number of unmarried couples living together has risen to more than 6 million. So, Lord Bailey, is there a severe lack of stable families in the UK, do you think?
I think I'm a big fan of marriage. I've been married for 18 years myself. Married people live longer, make more money, have better health, better mental health, their children do better in school. But stable families and marriage are not exclusive. There's many people who have a stable family who are not married. Marriage would suggest that. But I think the important thing is this. I spoke to a young person about this, and she basically said, I wouldn't want my marriage to look like her parents. But for young people, they could be married and make it look a different way. I think there'll be changes in marriage. And the other thing to say is, as well, most children, for a long time now, have been outside of marriage, started outside marriage. And I think that, so to the public, this wouldn't be a revelation. They'd have thought that for a time. But the other thing to say, we always talk about divorce rates and how people get divorced all the time, but married people are far less likely to go through a breakup than unmarried people.
OK. Amy, your views on this? I mean, the number of unmarried couples living together has risen to more than 6 million. It's fine, obviously. I mean, but the British married population has fallen below 50% for the first time, which is interesting because we've got an ageing population as well, really. So, I mean, it does really imply that most marriages are breaking down now, presumably.
Yeah, I don't know. What I find interesting is that with the rise of unmarried people, probably people think that if they split up and they live together, they'll have protections and things like that. So, and that's not the case. So I think there needs to be legal reform around this so that cohabiting couples who do split up get the same chances as if you get divorced.
Yeah, but the challenge with that, Amy, is how do you determine that they were a couple? Marriage is a legal contract which the government can more easily track.
But people aren't doing it, so they do need to be protected. We can't, like, push people into getting
Emily,
married.
what's your view on marriage, out of interest, asking for a friend?
Well, I'm not married yet,
No.
but I think it's quite sad that people aren't getting married because across so many metrics, for the couple and for their children, crucially, it is better, more money, far less likely to be living in poverty, far more stable. Children are likely to do far better at school, better outcomes across the board. So I think it's a sad thing if people don't get married. But what's interesting is that the Conservatives, to bring us back to politics, the Conservatives don't talk about this type of stuff. And it's quite interesting because you've got Monsieur Macron in France talking about the importance of marriage and having babies and all this, but the Conservatives are very shy about talking about traditional things like the family.
Yeah, that's a problem, isn't it?
It is a problem, and I'll tell you why we should talk about family. It's a statistical fact that families do better for children, do better for the adults involved. So any government should be talking about the most successful way to have a smooth flowing life, and a family is a statistical fact. And I think one of the most important things is we've talked about obesity today. We've often talked about people's poor financial situations. Marriage is one of the best ways of positively addressing both of those things.
Miriam Tate, for example, spoke about the importance of marriage and stable families, and immediately she got criticised for demonising single parents, and that's not the case. You can talk about the benefits of marriage without saying that single parents are useless.
But that's why politicians are terrified to speak about it. Just because you support marriage, it doesn't mean you don't support single people.
Exactly.
Just quickly, because in the next section, we're going to be talking about what's on the front of the Eye, which is about Labour being urged to essentially reverse Tory tax cuts. Or have to slash public services. Just quickly, I would quite like to talk about what's on the front of the Daily Express, which is, well, the opposite. Today's tax cuts are just the start, says Jeremy Hunt. Amy, I mean, you've got to welcome tax cuts, haven't you? Surely. Come on, cut the taxes.
I don't care about tax cuts. I really don't care about tax cuts. What I want is a good school for my son to go to. What I want is to be able to go and get a doctor's appointment.
So you pay more tax? You'd love to pay more tax?
I would like to just... My tax that I pay, which is quite a lot, according to my self-assessment this week, was so depressing when you have to give away that much money and what you get back is so woeful. No tax cuts. Improve public services, please.
Reform of public services. And crucially, you can have better public services and you can have tax cuts if you grow the economy. Then there's more money for public services.
And we cannot grow our economy if we don't have some tax cuts. We have to give people the ability to keep the money that they're earning.
But the tax cuts that they were suggesting were things like inheritance tax. None of us are going to pay inheritance tax.
No, actually, they're looking at income tax.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be, it's their last throw of the dice, isn't it, really, this budget?
And
it's their last chance to lose.
And also, inheritance tax shows you the moral dilemma about tax. When you tax someone's inheritance, they've already paid tax on that money.
You could say the same about buying a chocolate bar with VAT on it. I've already been taxed on my income. That's a double dip as much as
not in the same way. Not in the same way. Not in the same way.
Amy,
inheritance
you agree? Tax is fair.
Yeah.
Well, now I see when my taxes go, which is to Rwanda, it does feel a bit like theft. Yeah.
Look, at the end of the day,
Rwanda, from people from all over the world, actually, Amy. But there we go. Now, look, when England fans chanted "It's coming home," did they really mean this? Made in Chelsea star Georgia Toffolo watches the Chelsea match at Stamford Bridge in a bed.
Chelsea! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, has a good life.
How did she make that happen?
She's got a great life.
Toph is fantastic. Absolutely love Toph. Right, meanwhile, their West London rivals, Fulham, didn't cover themselves in glory earlier, as the club handed out flags to supporters and, well, it bore the unfortunate resemblance there of the infamous hoods of the American white supremacist group, the Ku Klux Klan. So, there we go.
Oh,
you don't need VAR on that one. Definitely
Whoever
foul play.
runs marketing's in trouble.
Someone, yeah, right, okay.
That's really
Gary, did you see what the flags would look like before they went out? Oh, sorry, it's just a bad day. Look, coming up. Is there any excuse for urinating on a cancer patient? No is the obvious answer, and I would like to qualify that immediately before someone clips it and thinks we're doing a debate on it. Find out why a wedding DJ has been jailed for doing exactly that, as I crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But first, we'll show you the latest electric vehicles who have gone up in flames, alongside more of tomorrow's front pages. And our second instalment of the Press Pack is Patrick Christys tonight, and we're only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Patrick Christys tonight, only on GB News. It's time to return now to the liveliest paper review you'll get on the telly, with more front pages for you right now. The Independent. Police have blood on their hands. Fury of knife victim's family. If you'd done your job properly, my beautiful boy might be alive today. That's the mother of one of the deceased, accusing the force's chief of failing to stop the stabbings. The triple killer is now sent to a secure mental hospital. The Daily Mail goes with aristocrat and her lover went on the run carrying newborn baby in a little bag for life. Old Bailey hears infant's body was found under rubbish in a shed. So this is that trial of the missing persons case initially that gripped the nation for a number of days, actually. They basically talks about the couple's 4 previous children, all of whom have been taken into care. It's that aristocrat and her lover who went on the run for a period of time. We'll have more detail on that shortly. The Telegraph, he's got away with murder. Well, I mean, he has, hasn't he? Quite literally got away with murder. Families furious at the CPS railroading as Attorney General to review the Nottingham killer's sentence. Do we think it's right that this guy, this triple killer, who tried to kill 3 more, by the way, has managed to essentially get off with murder? It's manslaughter, isn't it, he's got? Let's go to The Sun now. Corrie's Bill, 91, facing bankruptcy. Grief. He lives near Mum and Dad. Coronation Street legend Bill Roache faces being made bankrupt. Age 91. The Ken Barlow star has been formally
petitioned by HMRC over his tax affairs. I mean, this guy's been in comedy for absolutely yonks. If you're not still afloat after that, then good grief. Self-assessment's very confusing. It's been confusing for 91 years. The Times, police chief has blood in his hands. Right, there's a theme there, obviously. The Mirror as well. Again, they were failed. Right, OK, so the vast majority of the front pages tomorrow leading the way with this grieving families blasting authorities for not preventing this Nottingham rampage. Let's do a bit of that then. OK, I think it's fitting. It's on the front. Absolutely staggering cases. Look, Emily, I mean, you know, the idea that this bloke could be wanted for an arrest warrant. I mean, the fact that he came to Britain when he was 14 years old, his nickname when he was in his university dorm was the serial killer. He's then, you know, had numerous different arrests, numerous different violent offences, and was just allowed out, wandering the streets, goes on to kill 3 people and try to kill 3 others.
So many failures. And the statement after the judge's ruling, after he dished out the sentencing, a hospital order, not a conviction for murder at all. The statement from the victims earlier was so emotional, and they listed some of the failings from police, NHS, mental health services, social services, and, of course, the judiciary. And it was so emotional covering this earlier, hearing from the families. They do not believe that justice has been served at all, and they have no trust in the system.
Amy, you've got a different view.
Well, only about the verdict. I think in the run-up, he shouldn't have been out on the street. He should have been in a mental health facility. However, I think it's been overlooked quite how unwell he was when he committed these murders, which is why he has been sentenced to life in Broadmoor. It's not a cushy little tuck-you-in hospital. It's a mental health... high-security prison.
Hospital.
But I've been quite shocked by people failing to appreciate that he was suffering from schizophrenia to the point where he had paranoid voices in his head that I don't think
Can I just push back on that slightly? Because I don't think there's actually a huge amount. If you look at what's on the front pages today, there's not a huge amount of, like, you know, what an absolute scumbag this guy is. It is more a case of how was this allowed to happen, which implies, Sean, really, that people are... What they're angry about is the fact that the authorities didn't get a grip of this.
Look, a little while ago, a good friend of mine, her son, 22-year-old, was stabbed to death. And there are not words to describe the destruction that's caused in her life. And one of the few rays of hope was that she would get some justice. And if your family's in this position and doesn't get any justice, you will never, ever feel right. There's a large chance you will never feel right. But this pours petrol on that flame. You need to deliver justice. And the failings were multiple, and that's why the anger is so large.
All right, we're just going to shift it on now and talk about an electric bus has caught fire in London for the 3rd time this month. Firefighters tackled the flame... Not the same bus, I imagine. Firefighters tackled the flames engulfing the single-deck bus at a bus garage at Chelverton Road in Putney on Wednesday. 20 people were evacuated from the garage before emergency service arrived at the scene. Is it just me, or do these electric buses seem to be lighting up quite regularly now?
This is actually more serious than it seems, because electric...
It seems quite serious.
No, but let me paint a picture for you. Electric buses, the fires, electric cars, buses, the fire's almost impossible to put out. And we're very busy in this country putting millions of them on the road, and we haven't sorted the fire response to them. So picture a scenario where where a car goes up in an underground car park, and there's people that live above.
I mean, this didn't happen with the old petrol and diesel buses, did it?
No, much easier to
This is
put
an
out.
electric vehicle.
Well, I mean, it is possible to say. I mean, quite famously, they are flammable, to be fair.
No, but I mean, just to suddenly combust.
Erupt, to combust, It used to take, you know, a lighter and a match before, didn't it? And now it just needs to happen.
I can't talk about flammable electric vehicles without Alison Pearson here. She's the expert.
She is. And also,
is she now?
Also, to be fair, you are an expert on many things, Amy Nicker. I would not expect you to be an expert on the wiring of an inner-city London bus. So, look, fitness guru Joe Wicks has come under fire for this viral video. Can you work out why? OK, so, on the pull-up bar, fitness fanatic Joe Wicks kept everyone entertained and then, to be honest with you, a little bit annoyed during lockdown. And here he is, going up and down, and there's the little one next to him, isn't he? So he's been blasted for this supposedly, anyway, dangerous stunt because his 3-year-old mini-me son, Marley, is seen precariously balancing on a barbell before doing a series of chin-ups. That's one way to tackle the childhood obesity epidemic, though.
People need to keep their own house in order before they start criticising a fitness guru helping his kid do pull-ups. I mean, seriously. Everyone's got an opinion.
We're just so... we're so alien to any kind of risk. We need to let kids climb trees, get out there, get messy, experience some risk.
Joe Wicks has had this since he's had his little boy. People comment on every single move he makes. I remember when he had him in a baby carrier and everyone was like, what about the hips? Like, they're constantly worried about Joe Wicks' child. And I'm sure Joe Wicks knows what's best for his
I imagine these people are all perfect.
Well,
Perfect
quite.
parents.
David Beckham had it a bit, didn't he? I think it was that one where he kissed his 7-year-old daughter on the lips or something, and everyone was like, oh, it's disgusting.
Pervert.
Is it? It's disgusting. I don't know. His own daughter, for goodness sake. Anyway, it's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain on Union Jackass.
Probably might not.
It's Emily first. So, Emily, who's your greatest Britain?
Well, it's got to be the families of the Nottingham victims. They stood bravely and gave their statement.
Yeah, OK. Yeah, it's going to be a hard one to beat, to be fair. Go on, Sean.
Mine is Caesar, the police horse. He'd been euthanised after 23 years of service.
Aww.
He was described as a big horse and a big heart, and, of course, he helped keep the country safe, public order events and all sorts. And who doesn't love a beautiful horse?
Well, Caesar, may he rest in peace.
Aww.
Amy, who's your greatest Britain?
So I've gone for a flock of parrots.
Right.
Now, they learn to swear, and they could say... What Lee Anderson said to go back to France.
Right, that's OK.
And so they had to be rehomed in a new closure thing.
Wait, hang on a second.
With
they
other...
say F off back to France.
No, they don't say
xenophobic parrot.
I couldn't think of a way to say the whole being on live TV thing. They say F off. Can I say that? I can say
Look,
that.
it's happened now.
Yeah. And so they put them in a new enclosure where they hope that they won't say it anymore. But there's a risk because now they're with like 500 other parrots who might all learn to say it.
Of course.
So you're going to have.
Of course. OK. Look, on a more serious note, as much as I would have liked to have done the parrot and the police horse, I think today the families of the Nottingham victims. So there we go. They are today's greatest Britons. Union Jackass. Emily.
Well, it's got to be this wedding DJ that decided to urinate on a cancer patient. He's going to jail. And he's got to pay compensation. So, nice guy.
Yeah, that guy's an absolute pillock, isn't he?
Well, yeah. I mean, I can't think of anything more despicable and shows the decline in our society, I think. And he did it all for Snapchat, which I think makes it 10 times worse.
Yeah, why film it as well? Why do it? Well, let's be qualified that. Why do it?
And it was prostate cancer, by the way.
OK, Sean?
My Union Jackass is NatWest Bank. After they debanked our very own Nigel, they've now decided to debank basically a whole entire community in the Peak District. They're removing the last bank. But that's really important. If you're elderly or you just like to deal in cash, you want to speak to someone, they've removed your opportunity to do that forevermore. We need to make the banks provide some physical banks definitely in rural communities.
Especially in rural communities.
Exactly.
Because, the demographics in rural communities as well, often elderly. Anyway, go on, Amy, who's your Union Jackass?
My husband works for a branchless bank. But anyway, Michael Gove, because he has said the reason councils don't have any money is because of discredited diversity schemes and nothing to do with the fact that they have to fork out for temporary accommodation. And all sorts of things. So,
all right.
Yeah, Jackass.
Today's Union Jackass, an outrageous display of favouritism towards my own fiancée, is Lee Brookfield, who decided to urinate on a cancer patient. Can I just thank my wonderful panel? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to you for watching at home or listening out in your car or whatever you're doing. I'll be back at 9 p.m. tomorrow. Until then, keep fighting the good fight.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Good evening. After a fairly cloudy but mild Thursday, Friday looks much brighter, with most of us seeing some sunny spells. A couple of weather fronts to swing across the country, though, tonight. This one's already bringing cloud and rain to parts of northern England and Wales, and this one will bring a band of quite heavy rain that'll zip across Scotland and Northern Ireland this evening, and the gusts will suddenly pick up as that rain band moves across, and it will then spread across most of England and Wales from west to east. So we'll all see some rain through the night, but tending to become dry for most by dawn. Turning quite cold across northern Scotland. Some icy conditions possible here, and the showers will turn wintry. Some snow on the higher routes for sure through the night. and first thing in the morning. Elsewhere, though, it's a bright and breezy kind of day. Some early rain across Kent should be gone by sunrise, and then generally, as I said, a fine day with more sunshine than today. Showers will continue to come into western parts of Scotland, and temperatures will be lower than today. It won't be as mild, but these numbers pretty close to the average for the time of year. Turning a bit cold on Friday night in the south, some pockets of frost possible on Saturday. Again, outbreaks of rain across the northwest of Scotland. Quite windy here on Saturday too. The breeze picking up elsewhere in the west. A bit more cloud perhaps on Saturday, but still, for most, it looks largely dry and bright, and temperatures up to 9 or 10 degrees Celsius. Goodbye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's